And what's going on, Bruin Nation, LAFB fam? Great to see all of you. It's the Madman here. It's been a couple of days. Excited to be back online. Some reorganization going on with the LA Football Network. There was some family vacations in there. So excited to be back with you on all things UCLA. And we've got a great show today. We're going to be really heavily focused on the hardwood because my goodness, has the pendulum swung with UCLA basketball over these last 10 to 12 days. We left off in the conversation with the Bruins reeling from four consecutive losses, coming off of Mick Cronin's very harsh statements about the team, their level of effort, their level of intensity, what their expectation of success was. And we were left wondering, was this going to potentially even spiral this incredibly promising team, this roster, and this season to a point of no return? And in fact, what has happened is the exact opposite. The Bruins now coming off of four consecutive victories to be able to restabilize their season a bit, now sitting at 15-6 overall, 6-4 in the Big Ten, and sitting only one game behind Wisconsin for the number 4 slot in the Big Ten, and only 2 games behind a number 2 position in the Big Ten. So much to sort of play for here moving forward. But the Bruins resurgence is where we have to start. And I think over the course of these last few games, I think there's been a couple of patterns that have emerged, 3 really in particular. The first is we have to start with the big man, the man who has sort of taken this season by storm. He's in many ways the spiritual leader of the group, the mascot of the group, the energy linchpin of this team as a source of inspiration, Aday Mara. So excited for his development, particularly over these last 3 games. He has been working so hard in the weight room, on the court, before practice, after practice, really bringing that Mamba mentality to his preparation. And he finally sort of got his breakthrough in that Wisconsin game. What a tour de force performance there. 22 points on a perfect 7 for 7 from the field, and showed just a variety of offensive moves that it's starting to come together for him. We knew he had the skill. He's got that jump hook off of either hand. He's comfortable with the right hand, the left hand. He can spin to either shoulder. He's got really meticulous, methodical footwork. The big question with Mara was always the endurance, the physical stamina, and the physical toughness to be able to bang over the course of 25, 30, 35 minutes in a college basketball environment. And as his development has sort of matured physically, we're starting to reap the incredible results here. Mara has provided this team an interior force that now brings another dimension to this offense, and it's really sort of opened up the offense in so many ways. We're seeing a lot more a high screen and roll, and the ability for Mara to sort of dive to the basket, a lot of lobs, the ability to sort of post him up in a significant way when the shot clock is running low, drawing double teams, drawing traffic in the paint, and then being able to kick it out for wide open threes. And then, of course, I think his overall approach defensively has been really significant, particularly in that last game, the crosstown showdown victory against USC, where he was just all over the place, recording 5 blocks and really disrupting everything that USC wanted to do in the second half. And it's going to be an interesting conversation now for Mick Cronin with Mara's emergence. It's really given this team a sense of confidence and a sense of identity offensively. And I still believe the best possible lineup for UCLA moving forward is you bring in Mara at the 5, you got Bilodeau at the 4, Daly and Johnson become your 2s and 3s in an interchangeable way, and then you got Sky Clark running the show. I know there's been a lot of conversation about perhaps going smaller, maybe having even Bilodeau come off the bench, but I actually think kind of going Mara and Bilodeau down low, having your 2, all-floor wings in terms of Daly and Johnson, and then Clark running the team, and then having that sort of spark plug in Sebastian Mack coming off the bench with that leadership with Dylan Andrews, I think is really the recipe for success here. I actually think UCLA, in many ways, we have yet to see the best version of this team. They actually kind of remind me of the pro team in town, the preeminent pro team in town, the Lakers. where so much of the conversation in the last couple of years with the Lakers and their ability to sort of get to the next level has been, should Anthony Davis be at the 4 or should Anthony Davis be at the 5? And if you recall, in that 2020 season, the Lakers were able to win the championship because Anthony Davis was able to play to his natural position at the 4. They had Dwight Howard, they had JaVale McGee doing the banging at the 5, and it allowed Anthony Davis to sort of come for help with great defensive prowess, but also freed him up offensively. And I think there's a similar analogy here with UCLA. I think Bilodeau is just not physically strong enough to play the 5 in some of these big games. We saw it against Gonzaga. We saw it in some early season games where there was a greater deal of physicality, particularly a bit with New Mexico as well. And I think bringing Bilodeau down to the 4, he's going to be able to do all the things that he likes to do, and it's going to sort of free him up to be more of a rover defensively as well, with Mara doing the banging. So Mara's emergence, number one, has been absolutely key. I think the second big point when looking at this team, they're starting to just be more free-flowing offensively. And I think there's a decisiveness there. There's a confidence there. And I think Mick has taken the reins off a little bit. And you can see his behavior on the sideline is always going to be Mick. He's always going to be intense. But I've noticed the difference with him in terms of being able to allow for mistakes, being able to sort of go more with the ebbs and flows of the game and give these guys a little bit more room, a little bit more creativity, a little bit more rope to make mistakes and be more free-flowing. I don't know if that's a conversation Mick had with himself. I don't know if Martin Jarman stepped in. I don't know if other sort of donors or folks close to him stepped in. But you can see a behavioral shift in Mick pertaining to his guys and the willingness to kind of deal with mistakes and the willingness to play more of a free-flowing brand of ball over these last few games. And you can see it. 3 of the last 4 games, UCLA's crossed 80 points. 3 of the last few games, UCLA has been above 50% shooting from the field. And you can see the ball is moving. Guys are more decisive. Guys are playing with more confidence. They're not as afraid to make mistakes as they have been in the past. Really, the only game out of that 4 was the Washington game that sort of looked like old UCLA, kind of vintage Cronin 65-60, really sort of grinded out. But that was really the result of needing to change their game plan on the fly with Bilodeau's ankle injury and sort of having to get to a more conservative style. Outside of that, been wildly impressed with how UCLA has sort of moved the ball and really sort of gotten spacing, the right pace, and they're starting to make some great shots. And then I think the last point is, I'll sort of call it Madman's method, which I've been sort of talking about all year. You need to have 2 guys from the perimeter in double figures every game, and particularly from your lead guard spots, the 4 guys we're talking about, Clark, Andrews, Mack, Stefanovic. 2 of those 4 guys need to be in double figures every game for this team to be successful. If Bilodeau plays to his averages, Kobe Johnson plays a floor game, Daly plays to his averages, and now you get some support from Mara, it really comes down to what you're going to get out of those lead guards. And if you look at the last 4 games, 3 of the last 4 games, the Madman method has held up here. The big game against Iowa, you had 3 guys go in double figures. You had Clark, you had Mack, you had Andrews, all in double figures. Against Wisconsin, it was Clark, it was Andrews. And then finally against UCLA, it was Mack and it was Clark in double figures. The only game that they missed, Andrews ended up having 9 points to Clark's double figures, and he hit the big shot late in that game again to sort of give Washington the requisite, to give UCLA the requisite space from a lead perspective against Washington. So Mara's emergence, I think Cronin's self-inspection, and allowing this to be sort of more of a free-flowing game and recognizing that when it's time to sort of lock up defensively, then he can sort of tap into that. He's starting to play a little bit more of a pro-style approach here where he's letting the game be more free-flowing for the first 20, 25, 30, even 35 minutes of the game. But then when it's time to lock in that final 5 to 7 minutes, or when it's time to lock in critical moments of the game, if you're falling behind, you need a momentum swing, he's sort of dialing it up. So that's been key. And then the Madman method of these perimeter guys is really holding up. And what I'm excited about moving forward is I think there's an identity down the stretch with this team too. The big knock on Cronin has been lack of offensive identity and clarity in moments of stress in sort of clutch situations the last couple of years. And that has sort of manifested itself with blown leads in big spots in the tournament, Pac-12 tournament, and other marquee games. And where UCLA has been most successful has been when Cronin has really, again, employed more of a pro-style approach of having his lead scorer really serve in isolation environments. And we saw that in 21 and 22 with Jaquez and Jazang. Jazang kind of getting hot in that 21 run really is what propelled this team, because down the stretch, it was all about Jazang. Then, obviously, 22 and 23, it really was all about Jaquez. Anytime UCLA needed a big bucket, it was give it to Jaquez and really play isolation ball. And what we've seen over this season, particularly over these last few games, is Sebastian Mack has become that guy. Even though he's a sixth man, he has become that go-to guy down the stretch. We saw it against Wisconsin. The number of isolation plays in the last 3 or 4 minutes of that game. And Mack has this great sort of jump hook floater. He wants to use that body, go right, get in the paint, and then hit that floater. And he's been able to do that very effectively. And then we saw the massive shot that silenced the Galen center, the big three ball to make it 76-72 and have the Bruins prevail and run the city of Los Angeles, at least for the next few weeks. So Mack's emergence really as that next isolation primary player for Mick down the stretch, I think has been critical. But now you can add a wrinkle to that. Because if you can go Mack and Mara high pick and roll down the stretch, now you're giving Mack options. Mack can either drive to the lane, do his floater game, or he can sort of bait the defenders on the switches and sort of lead Mara for a dunk, or they can just create switching. And whoever gets the favorable matchup, then Mack can either go in isolation one-on-one, or you sort of post up Mara against a much smaller player, and he's going to be able to get a clean look. So the fact that now you can kind of go to this Mack-Mara two-man game down the stretch with the versatility that UCLA has, with the depth that they have, with the roster that they have, this is why I've always felt that this was a Final Four quality team. Now Mick is starting to find the slots that are working, and I think his emotional disposition has been growing the last few games. So much to be excited about, Bruin fans. Sitting now at 15-6, 6-4 in Big Ten play. Next two games are huge. Home for Oregon, home for Michigan State. This is now really an opportunity. These two games, if they can hold serve and protect Pauly and win these two top 15 marquee games, you're now back to where you were right at about the Gonzaga game, the North Carolina game, in terms of what you expect from this team, where they are. So this is really an opportunity, these next two games, to sort of reset and restabilize and re-inject UCLA into the national conversation as a preeminent Final Four contender. And I think Mick has also been playing cute with the media the last couple of days when he's been baited with these questions about Mara, about Bilodeau, about how much room is there in the starting five. And he said, look, no one's a lottery pick, and I'm not hearing anyone talk to us about being a Final Four contender. And I think he wants to maintain that chip on his shoulder for the team. He wants to maintain that underdog identity, but then be able to sort of really dial it in because he knows he's got a great roster here. So lots to be excited about, Bruin fans. We've got things stabilized. I'm so fired up. I got you covered after Oregon. I got you covered after Michigan State. And then we'll also talk a little bit of football. Things have been a little quiet, but some notable moves. We'll talk a little bit about Cody Whitfield. We'll talk about some of the potential gets in the portal. But the football program is head down grinding right now, as they should be. But it's a great time to be a Bruin. It's a great time to be alive and be a Bruin. And fours up forever, Bruins Nation. Until next time, we'll talk in a few days. Fours up forever.